What's up, Geeks and Gamers? It's Odin coming back with another video, and today we've got the box office breakdown for this past weekend, which saw Uncharted in its second week of release get up to $226 million in the international market, the entire total, meaning that the film is well poised to be able to break even and make some profit as well. Could be a very profitable film, in fact, especially since this film has yet to be released in the communist-controlled CCP China and other countries as well. It is set to be released there in the month of March. So this is obviously going to be a movie that we will be following here, while Spider-Man No Way Home has been able to pass $1.85 billion worldwide, again continuing to destroy all of those pandemic box office narratives. And it looks like Uncharted will also very likely be able to continue that conversation by being itself a pretty large budget film, and also being able to do quite well, making hundreds of millions of dollars overseas and across the entire world. We'll talk about these and other films, including Cyrano, the new musical with Peter Dinklage. Obviously, Peter Dinklage, very controversial figure in today's world with his comments that he made about upcoming films and about the roles of the dwarf community, etc., and much of the backlash that, of course, has been received by that. Well, his own movie, his own film, Cyrano, the musical version of the classical story of Cyrano de Bergerac, turns out to be essentially a financial flop disaster. Anyway, going into all of these films and more. Before going any further, though, please make sure you smash that like button, that fire button if you're watching us over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification turned on. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you see from Deadline, we have Uncharted darts to $226 million worldwide. Many of the box office sites, including Box Office Mojo and The Numbers, have not updated their figures yet with these international numbers, which means the film on those sites is not going to show the $226 million worldwide. So again, my charting is going to be based off of this number, though the individual numbers themselves are subject to change, seeing that some of the numbers have not yet been updated. Obviously, there's a lot of things going on right now in the world, including Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And obviously, my thoughts and prayers are going out to them as they go through this, and also just to the world in general, and praying for peace in our time, peace in our world. But as you can see from all of this, we are having ourselves, though, a pretty interesting time at the box office, because it looks like the box office is indeed doing well for films that are actually able to convince people to actually go out and see them. Turns out that marketing and sometimes actors and sometimes the film product itself are what people are actually going to see movies for. People are going to escape. And as someone who is a part of the demographic that likely is going out to see this film, Uncharted, someone who did not ever play the games, did not have any expectations, and came out of it saying, hey, the film was nothing new. The film didn't really add anything, and the film overall was just, again, not a very well-made movie. However, it was enjoyable enough as an action adventure, reminding me a little bit of, kind of in the vein of National Treasure, though not nearly as good, nowhere close to being as good as National Treasure with Nicolas Cage. It still has those treasure hunting aspects with maps and hidden messages and things like that. And for general audiences, I can see why many people are indeed going out to go see this film. Again, myself included, seeing this film opening night, and for the most part enjoyed it, though I did understand and see lots and lots of issues, of course, especially in the actual story itself, and also in just the casting of the character of Nathan Drake, because again, I don't really have a lot of connections to the games version of Nathan Drake, but what I do know is that Tom Holland played Tom Holland. That's something that I can say, is that Tom Holland kind of is getting into the point in his career where he seems to be pretty much a one-note person, pretty much a one-note actor. He's not really showing the dynamism of some of the other actors that have obviously gotten a lot of attention, especially in the Spider-Man universe, right? You look at people like Tobey Maguire, you look at people like Andrew Garfield, both of them being incredibly talented, not just actors, but also being able to portray so many different types and personalities. Whereas at this point in time, at the very least, it seems that Tom Holland hasn't quite hit that point yet. Maybe he won't if he keeps on taking movies like this. He might need to start taking some independent films similar to what we've seen from the likes of Andrew Garfield, most especially of all, kind of got his start with independent films. Maybe we'll need to see that in order for him to kind of be able to break away from that. But at this point in time, he is at least in a couple of films that are going to be making tons of money. Spider-Man already has made a lot of money, and the film Uncharted is expected to make some money too. So as you can see, the worldwide number is up to $226.4 million, while Sony also, again, doing both Uncharted and also doing Spider-Man No Way Home, has reached $1.85 billion. Now, of course, it is saying here that it has surpassed the worldwide total of Titanic's $1.84 billion. However, that is definitely deceptive because that is without adjusting it for inflation. And since that film came out in the 90s, we know that this film made a lot more than $1.84 billion. Again, while indeed Uncharted was able to hold pretty strong, we understand that it is going to still have to make money in competition next week with The Batman, which is expected to be a pretty massive success, especially domestically, expected to make well over $100 million in the domestic market, as well as being able to make some money in the international market as well. So Uncharted will have finally some competition there. However, the question, of course, is that we need to figure out and find whether or not this is going to be enough to actually compete against films like Uncharted, or the very least to be able to take enough money away from a film like Uncharted to keep it from its break-even point. But it's in a pretty good position to do so at this point in time. So as you can see, the numbers has not been updated yet, but this is at $224 million. Dog, in its second week of release, is around $32 million. Again, these numbers obviously can change. They are subject to change as some of the international numbers are slow coming in. So this film is also poised to make its money back. $1.85 billion is the current number for Spider-Man No Way Home, again, as we wait for these numbers to update. Death on the Nile continues to suffer a death at the box office, still not making much of anything, expected to be a flop. Jackass Forever continues to make a little bit of extra profit. Sing 2. Again, an amazing story of this little engine that could really a surprise box office hit by all stretches of the imagination. And notice that I haven't gotten to the newest releases yet. That hopefully kind of gives you an indication of why and where this film is in comparison to some of the other films that have been released. Marry Me, also looking in a position where it still needs to make a little bit more money to make its money back and to break even. However, it's definitely not one of the worst films on here as far as box office failures are concerned. Studio 666 is a new comedy, actually starring the legendary rock band Foo Fighters. So interesting stuff going on here. It says it moved into an Encino mansion steeped in grisly rock and roll history to record their much anticipated 10th album. Once in the house, Dave Grohl finds himself grappling with supernatural forces. So interesting that they are kind of going in this route. We'll see if it works out for them. So far, hasn't really done much of anything. It's only made $1.5 million in the domestic market. No budget on this film. I imagine it has to be low. It has to be around 10 million or less, I would imagine. So it doesn't have to make a whole lot to break even, but it does have to make something. And at this point, it's just not really doing much of anything. Speaking of that, Cyrano. Yes, that's right. The musical. Yes, it is a musical starring Peter Dinklage. Actually, this film came out in 2021. They released it in 2021 in limited release because they wanted it to be eligible for the Oscars award season, of which it got a couple Oscar nominations for. Nothing, of course, to do with the music, and nothing, of course, to do with actually, Peter Dinklage or any of the acting or writing or anything like that. More of, mostly costuming, things like that. But this film, not doing anything either. $1.4 million, and also only opened around 700 screens. So in reality, if you actually do the breakdown of the screen, or just the by the screen numbers, it actually is not as bad as it looks. But saying that this film cost $30 million to make, and it's already been out in limited release, and now it's just gotten to a, quote, wider release with over 700 screens, it's not looking good. It's not looking good. So we'll, of course, follow this as they maybe release this in more theaters. But again, they're going to look at a number like this and say, okay, it might have a good per theater release, but is Peter Dinklage going to be actually able to bring people out to a theater with everything going on? I just personally don't see it, but again, that's just me. Scream 5, again, still not really doing much of anything at this point. It's made its money. Blacklight also not doing much of anything. It's lost its money. And Moonfall continues to be probably what likely will be the biggest box office flop as far as total raw losses for the year 2022. Looking at the actual charting, because we like to do some charting over here on my website, ombreviews.com. Go check it out for that and more. As you can see, we've got the opening weekends for Cyrano and Studio 666. And because we only have the budget for Cyrano, right now it's looking at a $44 million loss. As again, it needs to make 2.5 times that $30 million budget, meaning it needs to make $75 million to break even. Not very likely for it to do so at this point in time. Uncharted, however, is in a very good position because with $226 million in its second week of release, that means that the minimum projection that I have for this film is going to be $322 million, which is $22 million over its break-even number, and it could do as well as $452 million. And of course, with China in the picture, you could see this film do even better. So we're looking somewhere between $300 and $450 million as a likely endpoint for this film. I would say that it's cautiously optimistic to have it actually towards the 450 number, only because it is going to have competition with films like The Batman, which is really just going to take over the market next weekend, is my prediction. I think there's going to be a pretty sharp drop. Uncharted did not have that large of a drop domestically or internationally this weekend, but next weekend, I think that's going to be a very different story, as the PG-13 rated The Batman comes out, and that film is expected to do pretty good numbers, to say the very least. But because of that, we, of course, have a very good situation for Uncharted. Dog also in a very good situation as well. Right now, with its second week of release, it is expected to make somewhere between $45 and $64 million. What that means as far as actual gains and profits, again, the break-even point for Uncharted is $300 million. The break-even for Dog is $37.5, and it very well could have reached that if any of the international numbers have not been fully up to date. But what that means is that Uncharted is expected to make somewhere between $13 and $91 million in net gain, in net profit. So we'll, of course, follow that and see just how much of a drop-off it has next weekend, and if that maybe changes the discussion. But right now, it's in a very good place. There's no real reason at this point to suspect that it will not do as well enough to be able to break even. I would say it most likely will hurt, the Batman's release will most likely hurt its max gain, or its potential for a max gain, since it is still getting that China release, as of course also is the Batman as well, because they're working with the communists. And again, I think that's something that we're talking about, whereas Dog is expected to make somewhere around $5 to $15 million, which I think is, respectable for a film that cost as little as that film actually did. Death on the Nile, with its current amount, is at an $85 million loss. Marry Me still at $11 million loss. Blacklight still at a $58 million loss. Moonfall, however, still again one of the biggest, with almost $200 million in the red for that film. Anyway, those are the numbers. As you can see, Uncharted still in the red at this point, $44.4 million in the red, but likely will make that up by the end of next weekend. Dog very, very close to breaking even as well. Again, will probably be before the probably by the beginning of next weekend, this film will probably have broken even. But what are y'all's thoughts about these numbers? Let us know in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, loud that fire button on Odyssey. And again, check me out over at OMB Reviews on YouTube and Odyssey, and of course my website if you want to do and travel to my website and check out, of course, the box office tracking. And of course, go to geeksandgamers.com. That way you can become members over there and get access to all kinds of fun stuff, including exclusive streams, etc. Anyway, you're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.